I still remember the day I stepped into this house as a bride, my hands adorned with henna, my heart filled with dreams, and my soul brimming with hope. I had imagined a life where love would be my greatest strength, where my husband would be my partner in all joys and sorrows. But life had other plans. I am Mira, a woman born and raised in a small town where traditions are deeply rooted and simplicity is a virtue. My education was limited, my exposure to the modern world even more so, but my heart was rich with love, my mind full of dreams of a happy marriage. When I married Arjun, a well-educated man from the city, I believed that love would bridge all differences between us. I was wrong. From the beginning, I felt out of place in his world. His friends spoke fluent English, laughed at jokes I didn't understand, and discussed topics that made me feel small. I would stand in the background during social gatherings, smiling awkwardly, hoping no one would notice how lost I was. I tried to keep up, to learn, to mold myself into the woman he would be proud of. But no matter how hard I tried, I always felt like an outsider in my own home. At first, Arjun was patient, or so I thought. He would correct my pronunciation. When I mispronounced English words, he would roll his eyes when I struggled to use my phone properly, and he would sigh in frustration when I failed to follow his modern way of thinking. Mira, you need to improve yourself, he would say, his voice laced with disappointment. It was these little things that, over time, became mountains between us. I started questioning myself. Maybe I wasn't good enough for him. Maybe I should have studied more, learned English better, understood his world before stepping into it. I spent nights practicing words I had heard him use, mimicking his tone in front of the mirror, reading books in a language that didn't feel like mine. But it was never enough. And then she entered our lives. Ria. She was everything I was not: confident, independent, well-spoken, and modern. She worked in Arjun's office, and I could see the admiration in his eyes. Every time he spoke about her, he would compare me to her in subtle ways, pointing out how effortlessly she carried herself, how she understood his world, how she was someone he could talk to without feeling burdened. I started seeing changes in him. He became distant, always on his phone, always lost in thoughts that no longer included me. The warmth in his eyes, the soft touches, the stolen glances, everything faded. It started with small things: long phone calls, late night messages, lunch meetings that lasted for hours. I noticed the way his eyes lit up when he received her texts, how he laughed at her jokes in a way he never did with me. I knew I was losing him, yet I remained silent. One evening, as I set the dinner table, he walked in, speaking on the phone. His voice was softer, his tone more affectionate. "Ria, you understand me like no one else does," he said, oblivious to my presence. My heart clenched, my hands trembled, but I continued placing the plates as if nothing had happened. I had always feared this moment, the moment when I would have to face the truth. But hearing it, witnessing his betrayal, was far more painful than I had ever imagined. Later that night, I gathered the courage to ask him, "Arjun, do you love her?" My voice barely rose above a whisper. He looked at me, startled. For a moment, there was guilt in his eyes, but it disappeared just as quickly. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Mira, you don't understand. It's not about love, it's about connection. Ria and I, we have similar mindsets. She understands me in ways you never could. His words felt like a slap. I had given him everything, my loyalty, my devotion, my heart. And yet it was not enough. But I am your wife, I said, my voice trembling. And that's exactly why I never wanted to hurt you, he replied, as if that justified his betrayal. Days passed, and his indifference became more apparent. He stopped pretending, stopped making excuses. He would come home late, smelling of a perfume that wasn't mine, carrying the weight of a love that belonged to another woman. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering where I went wrong. Was it my lack of education? My inability to converse in English? My simple way of living? I had tried so hard to be what he wanted, yet I had failed. One evening, as I sat alone on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, a realization dawned upon me. I had spent my entire marriage trying to become someone I was not, just to be worthy of a man who never valued me. But why? Why did I have to prove my worth to someone who had already decided I was not enough? For the first time, I allowed myself to see the truth. I was not the problem. Arjun was. He was the one who had vowed to stand by me, to love me, to respect me. And yet, he had discarded me the moment he found someone more suited to his taste. The next morning, I packed my bags. I placed my wedding ring on the bedside table and walked out of the house that had never truly been my home. I did not cry, nor did I beg him to love me. Instead, I chose myself. As I stepped out into the world, I realized that my journey was just beginning. I may have been a woman from a small town, but I was not weak. I would educate myself. I would learn. I would grow, not for him, but for me. For too long, I had allowed society to tell me that my worth depended on my husband's approval. But not anymore. As I boarded the train to my parents' home, I saw my reflection in the window, tired eyes, but a determined gaze. I was no longer the woman who lived in the shadow of her husband's expectations. I was Mira, and I was enough.